amongst us, or certainly with me anyway.
Well, I feel that's a very good suggestion. I invite you, Mike, to lead us through this. It'd be lovely, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. E mihi ki a koutou, ngā member o te kaunihera o te mātaua Māori, orohi o te mātaua Māori. Mihi ki a koutou I tēnei ata. Me a rātou he noho ai ki a rātou kāinga, he titiro ana ki tēnei hui-huinga. He tika I tuwhera tātou hui, ki a tātou Karakia. So I ask you to, within your own homes, with your mutes on, please be silent. Kia. Whakatakata hoki te uru. Whakatakata hoki te tonga. Kia mākina ki uta. Kia mātaratara ki tai. He hiaki ana te atakura. E tio. E hoka. E hou. Ki hei Māori ora. I'll try and remember the English translation here. May the winds from the west caress us, the winds from the south caress us. May the gentle breeze blow the land, may the gentle breeze blow over the ocean. May the red tip dawn bless our day.
And yeah, touch of frost.
Along those lines. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick?
You're on mute, Rick.
Thank you, Mike. Whenever I hear that, I always think that I'm up on a mountain on a tramping or a deer hunting trip. It's just great. The red tip dawn, I love it. Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting on the 20th of May. Do we have any apologies, apart from the chair for being late? Any other apologies?
Kia ora, Chair. Charles Lambert is absent, please.
Charles, all right. Will somebody move the apologies be received? Anyway, do I have a seconder?
Jerf.
Jerf, cool, thank you. All those in favour say aye, or thumbs up, please. I'm still old-fashioned. Good. Are there any notices, James? All right.
No, none from me.
Leanne, anybody else got any notices?
Just one from me, Mr. Chairman. I need to leave at 11:30. I do see we're due to finish at 11.
Okay.
11:30 in case we don't.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best to see you released at 11.
Thank you.
Okay. Conflict of interest declarations. Any additions or changes to conflict of interest declarations?
Chair, could I please acknowledge an interest in item 10 and happy to take advice whether it needs to go any further than that?
Well, these things are for you to decide, but the general rule is that if you have a conflict of interest, you should absent yourself from the process. That's the general rule. Some places are very tougher than others. A former life of mine, you've got no papers, no nothing. You were completely out in the dark and met with no one on the subject at all. But we don't live in that sort of extreme environment, so you're welcome to have the paper, and I think you can just decide for yourself which you think is appropriate.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, confirmation of the minutes. Can we have the minutes sort of thing, the extraordinary council meeting? I'm happy to move the minutes from the chair. Does anybody wish to second the minutes?
I'll second that.
Anyway, I've got Henry's hand first. Jerry, she beat you out the blocks. Okay. Is there anybody got any additions or amendments to the minutes? Being none, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour will say, raise a thumb. Those against, put a thumb down. They're carried. I'll now hand over to the chair who's arrived. Our fearless leader, Rex, we're up to item 4.
I see that. Thanks, Rick, and apologies to everyone. But Lily's gone back to school, and how am I going to ever cope?
I said to you, she has to be declared an essential worker for Wednesdays.
I'm doing my best, but she won't agree. Okay, so we have. Thanks, Rick, for taking over. So we have significant items. Item 4. That's where we're up to. Is that correct?
Yep.
So,
thank you, Chair. Look, we'll take this as read and answer any questions. Probably the only overarching comment I would make is that the activities report, I think, recognises the transition that we're in into level 2 and a changing level of activity across the organisation. There's obviously a focus on annual plan preparation, which Council's well aware of, and we're engaged with Council on. And the other point I'd draw to Council's attention is the continuing high demand for the Regional Business Partners Program, with nearly 1,000 recipients of workshop presentations to date, and a record level of vouchers provided to businesses for business assistance. So not surprising given the current economic conditions, but it is good to see that those services are being well utilised.
Thank you, James. We have questions for James or his team, starting with you, Craig, and then back to you then, Neil.
Thanks, James. I think I'm in the right place. Page 14 of your report, item 20 and 21, about the TB outbreak and Fonterra's assistance. Could you just enrich that a wee bit? Is that what they're looking to do there? Fonterra have partnered with HBRC and QE2 to protect a nationally significant wetland along the upper reaches, etc., etc. That sentence there, and there's 40k going in the first year. Can you tell us a bit more about that? That says the first year, so I assume there's more funding coming. Is that something brand new or just come into play?
Councillor, I'll defer to Mr. Maxwell on this one.
Chair, through you. So just for clarification, yeah, it's not related to the TB item above, Councillor. So it's a separate project. So the Pigsty wetland is a regionally significant wetland on the true right bank of the Narurara River around Whanawhana. There's a dairy farm operation immediately adjacent to it that actually owns the wetland. The landowner has agreed to work, we've been working with that landowner for some time to see whether we could enhance, protect and restore the wetland. He's been very amenable and agreeable to that over the years. And we've been able to add to the program with that contribution from Fonterra. So Fonterra stumped up with some money, we're stumping up with some money. It'll be used for weed and pest control this coming summer and beyond.
What's the total amount of potential assistance from them and us in this particular wetlands?
My understanding is the 40k is for this first year. Look, I'll have to come back to you with the total budget for the project. Sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Thanks.
Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Essentially a question for Jess in relation to the annual plan preparation. I just wonder whether you can give us a bit of a countdown of the various steps. Do we actually adopt a draft plan? And then we obviously adopt the final plan on 30th of June, I think. Can you give us a rundown of the key dates and the final steps or involvement councillors have in the process?
Sure. So we'll be talking to you a little bit more about the draft consultation document at our workshop following this council meeting, with the expectation that the consultation document and supporting documentation will be adopted at next week's council meeting for consultation. And then we'll go through a consultation process, receiving submissions. We'll hold hearings, we'll provide some analysis of the submissions for a final decision to be made in July as the anticipation.
So the key steps for councillors is the agenda paper for next week,
right.
And that'll give us a full breakdown of the entire plan. Is that how it works?
Yes, that's right. The consultation document will be on the agenda next week for you'll need to adopt it for consultation and all the supporting information. So that will come to you next week.
And the workshop today is an aid of that?
Yes, so we'll just spend a little bit of time today just running you through the key messages and confirming the options for the proposals.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Will?
Thank you, Chair. Question for Ian. page 14, item 37, the team leader there that's resigned, is that workload able to be spread, or is there work been having to put on hold there?
So through you, Chair, no, we haven't stopped any work. What we're doing is spreading that around. We have an acting team leader in the role at the moment, so somebody capable within the section has stepped up to do that, and we're sharing the work of that team around other scientists within the group. So nothing is stopping.
Thank you, Ian. Any other questions? Okay, we have some. Oh, sorry, Uppy.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Nice simple question. Going back to item 20 and 20, well, actually 21, with regards to Fonterra and that area of national significant wetland. Do we know the iwi historical name for this significant area, and are we able to put both that and the term pigsty, because quite obviously that was to me was named after someone's partner. So I'm wondering if there's a chance, and if we know in our cultural studies and
proper name.
Yeah, what's its proper name, and could we include that in documentation going forward, please?
So very fair point, Councillor, and point taken. Look, just for context, it's in historical oxbow of the river, so it's an area that's been carved out of the true right bank. So I'm not sure of its age, but yeah, look, we'll endeavour to correct that. That's a very, very valid point. Thank you.
That certainly is a valid point. Any more questions or comment? If there are none, can I have someone to move to receive? Oh, Martin, you will move to receive? Or you have a question?
Just a question. I really appreciate these reports, and I'd just like to maybe tease out a different aspect each time, rather than just letting it go unquestioned. I had a question around the works group project. There was a managing great rides application approved by MBIE. Just wondering what that was about. But I have always been wanting to ask a little bit just what this priority project for the Ahuriri underpass flooding safety issue was about with the seawall plan. Just a little bit of a heads up on that would be great. Doesn't have to be now. But.
Is that you, Ian?
Sure, I can answer those. So they're Chris Dolly's, and Chris can't be with us this morning. He has another commitment. Look, the underpass is something which was created when the current expressway was put through. Those that have cycled around that area will know that there is a tunnel that goes under the expressway that walkers and cyclists use. And at high tide, the water actually comes over the walkway, and there is appropriate signage and warning, what have you, and guardrails to prevent it being a major hazard. But it is an inconvenience for people, and it does disrupt the loop there. So the work we're doing with the NZTA is to come up with a solution that avoids inundation at high tide. Essentially, as I understand it, sort of concrete walls around the walkway, so that you'll be able to get through there unimpeded. So that work is ongoing. The funding from MB, I couldn't give you the specific details, but I know it's an expansion and enhancement of our regional cycle network, and I'm sure we can provide some further detail to the Regional Transport Committee on that as it comes through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Appreciate it.
We have a mover to receive this report, please.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a follow-up question on an item as well, please?
Oh, we'll do that first, Uppy.
With regards to page 25, I was unable to attend the workshop with Tangata Whenua, and I'm looking for confidence from the staff that the adoption for consultation for the 27th of May. I also note that the RPC is not meeting till the 3rd of June. So around those dates and inconsistencies, were you able to achieve sufficient consultation with iwi during the workshop, which might explain the misalignment of those dates? I'm just looking for some confidence, please.
Yeah, look, it's my view that we had a very successful workshop yesterday. The feedback we've had from attendees is they felt well informed about the current situation. One of the key themes of the workshop is that there are significant financial constraints on council right now, and so our ability to do more in the environmental sphere that contributes to the regional economic recovery will be highly dependent on central government funding. There does seem to be a large amount of central government funding available, but the terms of that remain unknown in terms of co-funding requirements from council. So the current proposal in the annual plan consultation is to establish a $1 million recovery fund for consultation, and that would enable us to make some co-funding contributions. Between now and the finalisation and adoption of the annual plan, which will be, as Jess said, in July, we have got the opportunity to clarify those co-funding requirements with central government, continue the discussions that we currently have underway with tangata whenua around opportunities for participation in environmental recovery activities, and bring that all together in an all package. So I'm satisfied that at this stage of the process, the consultation is well underway. I wouldn't say it's complete. It will be happening in parallel with that broader community consultation. And I'm confident that by late July, Council will be in a strong position to make decisions in the full knowledge of the views of the wider community and of our treaty partners as well.
Thank you, Api. Michelle, do you have a comment on that?
No, not a comment on that. I'm just asking about the what the update is about the river mouth, because I noticed I went down there a couple of days ago and it's almost closing off. So when we have the discharge from the wastewater, it'll just be sitting in the Whakamahi Lagoon. Just a bit concerning. Just want to know what the update is on that, please.
So look, it's under active review daily at the moment, and we do stand ready with a contractor to commence opening works once the decision is taken. I couldn't give you an update from within the last 24 hours. That's the most recent conversation I've had with the group manager. But look, I'm happy to take that offline and give an update to Wairoa-based councillors and to you too, Michelle, who will be interested in this.
That was a couple of days ago, and we've had a bit of rain over the last few days, and the river's gone up. So maybe it's assisted opening the mouth, but it's really weird. I've never seen it like that. It's just like goes into, there's a little wee gap, and then it's coming back around. It usually just shoots straight out, and it's just slows to nothing, and it's just like bubbly E. coli. Yeah, so just a bit of a concern.
Yeah. So look, I am advised that there is a dog's leg, if you like, at the end of it, and it's been backflow up towards the township. And look, obviously, this is one of the reasons why the wastewater discharge into the river mouth is not an ideal set of arrangements for the longer term, which, as you'll be aware, are subject to the resource consent processes at the moment. Look, we have budget and the ability to open the mouth. We tend to just be slightly cautious about doing that if it's going to only have a very temporary benefit, given the significant cost to ratepayers. So look, I'll find out where it's at as of today, and ensure you get an update.
Thank you.
We do have a mover. Craig's moved, and we're looking for a seconder. But before we go for the seconder, I just want to comment on the meeting with Tangata Whenua. I thought it was a very successful meeting, and a lot of that was due to the very good chairmanship by Petty. So I wanted to thank you for that, Petty, publicly, because I thought you did an outstanding job. And I see you sitting in my office looking very formal, and perhaps this is a sign of the future. Anyway, thank you very much. You did a wonderful job, and I thought it was a really successful meeting. Okay, now we're looking for
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to second, but just one request of arising from the significant activities. James, I wonder whether we could have at our next meeting an update of those infringement notices to the respective councils for wastewater discharges have taken place, whether we just have an update across all of those to get a feel for what that looks like. A note, for example, the ongoing issues with the Napier City outfall. Is that possible to give us a brief overview at the next meeting?
Chair, I mean, I could deal with that right now very quickly if you wish.
Yeah, I was just hoping to get more details, technical detail, obviously, what it looks like.
I'm over the details, so I can.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be good, James, to do that. Given what on the paper this morning.
Three issues referenced. So the first of which was in Havelock North, tree damage to sewer main in McCarty Street resulted in overland flow of raw sewage into the nearby stream. The Hastings District Council has been issued with an infringement notice on that, and I've spoken directly to the Chief Executive and requested that the replacement of that sewer main be a priority. That's number one. Number two, Wairoa District Council was also issued with an infringement notice for the issuing of or the disposal of wastewater into the river mouth outside of an outgoing against their resource consent. That was a result of a system failure, and the alarm system that should have resulted in swift action went to a cell phone that was being used in a rural area outside of reception. So the alarm wasn't raised until a significant period had elapsed and the wastewater had discharged into the river inappropriately. I've taken that up with the Wairoa District Council, and they have made changes to their duty roster system to ensure that the alarm is going to multiple staff and staff who are in cellular coverage at all times. So that's been addressed. Napier City Council, they have a further leak that has occurred with respect to their outfall, and we're currently in the preparing an abatement notice to the Napier City Council to require the remediation of the now several leaks that are in that wastewater outfall. So they're still at a considerable distance from the shoreline. There's no public health risk at this stage, but it is still contrary to the resource consent in terms of the performance of that asset. And look, the asset is due for replacement within the current long-term plan period, the 10-year long-term plan period. And the discussions that we will be having with Napier City Council is, and indeed have been having with Napier City Council, is whether bringing that replacement forward is possible. But in the meantime, it's our view that a repair needs to be enacted.
Thank you, James. Does that cover it, Neil?
Yeah, happy to second, Mr. Chair.
Before you do, Michelle, you just have a further point?
Yeah, no, you knew it was coming, James. How long did that discharge occur? And if it was it on the incoming tide, so that would have been bringing it into inland? Oh,
that's
long?
Correct.
You know?
It was on the incoming tide. Look, from memory, about an hour and a half or thereabouts.
Oh, God.
So a reasonably significant.
Not looking good when we're going into consent time. Not looking good.
Great.
No.
Fire out. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a mover and a seconder. I would think we'll go straight to it unless Craig or Neil wish to speak.
Yes, I just want to make, or Craig, just a very few comments, Mr. Chair, and it is in relation to the last item. I believe that we must refocus on some of those really important health-related issues. Our infrastructure, clearly, we've got, Add in Central Hawke's Bay's issues with wastewater, and from one end of the rollhee to the other, we've got this significantly failing infrastructure around wastewater, and I think we've really got to refocus post-COVID on that sort of response. Clearly, we've got failures going on, and it's our job to work with those authorities to fix it. In relation to public health, I appreciate words to the effect that no health issues arise, but I note trawlers fishing and recreational fishers out fishing in that zone. That in anyone's book presents a measure of risk that we just need to be conscious of. We must act in this area. It's our core business.
Thank you, Neil. I'll just comment to that because clearly Three Waters is an issue that's on the table with all the councils at the moment. And I agree 100% with Neil. These issues have to be solved. But they're quite difficult to solve in small rural towns like Wairoa, where they don't have the capital base to solve it. So I'm hoping that we will get some rational thinking around Three Waters. We tried to get some rational thinking around amalgamation a few years back, but nationalism got in the way, and nationalism continues to get in the way of the Three Waters discussion. But it just can't. So we've just got to move forward and fix these infrastructure issues, as you are declaring there, Neil, as a community. You've got to get onto it. Okay, any other speakers? No other speakers. All those in favour of receiving these reports? Aye, thank you very much. So James, we will move to item 5, which is your verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. It will be reasonably brief today because we are moving to some semblance of normality in terms of council operations. So first of all, with respect to the Regional Civil Defence Welfare Response run out of the Group Emergency Coordination Centre, what we've seen is a significant decline in the last week in the number of cases that we are dealing with in terms of welfare response. And look, I think that recognises the increased mobility that's occurring in the community and for people to be able to provide for themselves in terms of their basic needs. So that's an encouraging sign, but we are continuing to provide the services in terms of the work with the welfare community through the network of networks, maintaining an 0800 number and providing needs assessment and dispatch of goods as required. And we will continue to do that until central government has provided the clarity with which we're all currently awaiting around the transition to the new Caring for Communities model that will, over the more medium term, ensure that the community's welfare issues related to COVID-19 are adequately addressed. So the group is now almost entirely staffed by its permanent civil defence staff, with only a small number of council staff assisting, and that part of the phase, which was obviously an enormous focus for us during lockdown and a huge resource commitment, is more or less behind us now. With respect to the council's core operations, all of our field staff who don't have any significant health risk, there's just a small number of staff that we're managing differently, but most, in fact nearly all of our field-based staff are now back at work and operating, and we have progressively brought back this week into the council building key staff who need to be within our workplace to be fully effective, and that's going smoothly with a rolling induction process and a new series of operating protocols within our buildings. We still do have a significant number of staff who are working from home, but that's been continuing to be actively managed, and we are certainly getting through the work. So we are seeing this as a 2-week period of level 2 before review, and we'll be watching guidance from central government closely before moving to the next phase of bringing further staff back and resumption of our normal business practice. I would just say, though, that we are giving active consideration to new flexible working arrangements, and in particular the plans we did have around accommodation expansion and whether or not it will be more prudent to look at using our existing floor space, offices and IT infrastructure more flexibly to reduce costs to the ratepayer in the medium to longer term. So that work is underway as well. That's all from me, Chair.
Thank you, James. Questions for James? Oh, it's got to be a first, James. Thank you very much, everybody. Can we move to receive James's report, please? Rick will. Second, Henny Y. Thank you very much. Rick, do you wish to talk, or Henny Y? Do you Henny Y? Okay, anyone wish to speak? All those in favour of receiving James's report? Aye, thank you very much. Now we'll call for minor items on the agenda. Now, minor items on the agenda, we had a little bit of discussion about it last time, so I just want to clarify it. This is a moment when councillors can bring an item which is not on the agenda, which they think will be of interest to council. It may be a wetlands that you've been working on, or whatever. And it's really important to signify that you're going to do it now. It's not a moment where we're going to have a big discussion. It's the council report, 3 to 5 minutes. We can keep it to 3. That's good on the issue, and we go to the next one. It's not a period of debate. It's just where someone presents, they've done something in particular, or they think of something of interest to council. So, okay, if we're all clear of that, and we all know the rules around that, do we have any minor items for the agenda? Neil?
Yes, COVID Recovery Welfare Fund.
Welfare Fund. Yeah. Anyone else? So I'll give a brief report on a meeting with the Minister yesterday.
For clarity, Mr. Chair?
Yes,
so would minor items also be the place to ask for a report on activity or specific activity or anything like that?
Yes, it is. You won't get it at the moment.
No, that's correct. No, just to send a signal out to the team.
Yeah, to send a signal. Exactly, it is. It's a good time to do it. So you want to do that, Happy, before I go to Mr.
That would be great. I'd just like to know if there is being an audit report done on activities of the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence and Emergency Management.
Hold it.
Oh, okay.
Hold it until we do it. Michelle? Michelle, you have a minor item? Oh, you're on mute, mate.
Tried the spacebar thing, wasn't working. Just wanted to update on how the erosion, the farm environmental management plans in the Wairoa district.
Erosion, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Rick, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no. I was just going to say that it's also traditionally minor items has been a time where people will signal that they're reporting back on a committee that they've attended. So if they're on the Cycle Waste Committee, they say Cycle Waste Committee report, and at that point they'll give a report on the committee they've attended. Or if they've gone to a local government New Zealand conference, they'll say local government New Zealand conference, and then they'll report on what they did. So it's an opportunity to report on what they've done, and it's not a debatable item because people haven't had advice of it in advance. So.
And we need to keep that's right. We need to keep it short. Well, Craig wants to put that down as a, and I think it's a very good idea. We need to talk about that sometime, but further, Craig, because I think council often these committees do take place, and Jerry's off doing his job on coastal erosion, and it'd be quite good for us to get a 3-minute update from them. Period.
We agreed it last week. I think it was just before you came on in the minutes. So
yeah, okay.
That's under chain. Now the minutes have been confirmed. I guess it will appear on the next agenda.
Okay, and we'll do one at a time. Won't do them all at once because we'll be here all day. But we can do them one at a time. Okay. So we have 4 items which are going to come up on minor items.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification, please.
Yes.
On minor items, because we could make it so broad that anyone who wishes a bit of information out of the council can just request it at this point. I think we need to be quite clear what it really is, because otherwise everybody's just gonna wait for minor items and just having a go. And we need to be very careful. If it is just for information, or is it for actually requesting information? Actually, we could create a lot of work for our staff if we don't watch out. So we need to be quite clear about what minor items really is. And I think Craig has started the discussion, and maybe we should carry on with that and have it maybe even written down somewhere what it actually means and what it doesn't mean, because otherwise it could become a fishing expedition and could tie us up for hours.
There's of course always the risk. Leanne, do you have a comment? I don't want to go onto your chat page, So, Leanne, can you just comment on that? Your comment?
Sorry, just for clarity, Chair, minor items is the place to bring up items of interest that you want to convey to the council.
That's what I thought.
It is not actually the avenue for requesting reports for upcoming agendas or those types of things. If there was more information required in response to the significant activities or one of the other agenda items, it's traditionally then that you would request that further information or further reports.
Okay, so we'll take Api and Michelle's issues today, but yeah, let's clarify that and get that right for the future. Okay, that we have 4, so we're not overwhelmed. We don't. I think Jer's point is we don't want to become overwhelmed, and we don't want to put just extra pressure on our team. So we will accept those. Item 7 is our procurement policy. Who's driving that for us?
It'll be me.
Oh, it'll be you. Okay, Jessie, you're on.
Good morning. So this item is effectively to update council on the changes that have already been made to support local businesses. Yeah. And we're seeking your feedback and asking for your support to formalise an increase in the weighting from 5 to 15% for local providers of local services and goods. That's effectively rationale for the paper, so happy to take questions.
Craig?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jessie. Absolutely supportive of your intention here. Just one question. Line 14, you talk about currently the weighting for local procurement is 5%, and you're questioning should this go to 15, which is fine, but obviously something else would go down. Are you able to supply us with a table or a couple of headlines of what makes up the majority of the other percentage somewhere, or have I missed it in the paper somewhere?
Got Mark Heaney, who's our procurement manager, on the phone as well. I think he's there.
There he is, Mark.
We're currently, I think the answer to your question is that those ratings are variable and agreed by the evaluation team as part of any procurement process. So it's not set in stone what the ratings specifically are, but from my memory, we had formally in our last review of the procurement policy committed to it a minimum of 5% weighting for purchasing local and supporting those who pay the living wage, but Mark will be able to elaborate a little bit more on that point.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Go there then. Just before we go there, then just thanks for us. I'm very, very supportive of what you're trying to do here, and it's we can only rate local, we can only manage things within our region, and first and foremost, looking local is absolutely what we should be doing all the time, regardless of COVID, I think. But of course, the next criteria is quality. But if we back Hawke's Bay, Hawke's Bay can provide local goods and services.
That's a comment for you. Are we taking comments or are we doing questions, Rex? So I've got a comment I'd like to make.
Oh, we're doing questions actually. Questions to Jess right now. I thought that was a question, Craig.
He slipped in a little quick statement at the end. He got past you there really quick. He was fast.
Rick, and of course you've never done that, Rick.
No, I haven't. I refuse to do it.
Question from Martin, who's Martin?
Thank you. I'll reserve any comments for later.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to find the 5% reference in the existing policy so that I could understand it in context, and really picking up on Craig's question. How does that 5% operate alongside the other policies that are part of that? So that's question 1. And question 2 is really for Jess. Are we able, as part of the review that this issue is being introduced into, to look at the long-term life cycle costs or implications of procurement part of the policy through a climate change lens? In other words, it refers to long-term environmental implications of a particular procurement decision. Could we, as part of the review that you've introduced here, sweep directly a reference to climate change in that context? Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I can see Mark Heaney's nodding his head, so we might go over to him to answer those questions.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Foss and Councillor Williams, for the questions. If I take Councillor Foss's question first, the 5% is a variable, as Jess explained. The proposal is to give greater emphasis to that, which seems to have your support. And Martin, your question is, where does it appear in the policy? It does not appear in the policy at the moment, so you won't be able to find it. It's actually in the procurement manual, which is the operational side. And as far as a table of considerations for evaluation teams of procurements, yes, you alluded to quality, there is price, there is the ability to complete the deliverables as requested, etc. But they all will consistently add up to 100%. So increasing the buying local element to 15% is automatically going to reduce the others by an appropriate amount.
Okay, just a follow-up question there, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I'm wondering, are we actually being asked to change the policy here or the manual? I just wanted to make sure that this is a decision we need to make.
As I indicated, it's not actually in the policy at the moment, and you may wish to include it in the policy. Okay. But I would caution against putting a firm number in there, because it will be variable according to the circumstances of the individual procurement.
I agree with that.
You're making a statement there, Councillor Barker.
I was just an over on the side, just to sort of I wasn't called by the chair as interrupting with
he takes liberties. He takes liberties, Martin. There's nothing I can do about it. He's just a rogue. Jess, do you want to comment on that, though?
Yeah, I think what we're suggesting is that we formalise our commitment to supporting local providers in the procurement policy, and we give an indication of a preference to increase the weighting within the manual, which accompanies the procurement policy.
Okay, are there any other questions for either Mark or Jess? Henny White, waving there, I see.
I'm going to feed off Rick, and is it comment time, Rex?
No.
No. Okay, then I'll make it into a question.
I know he leads by a very poor example, but you must have discipline anyway. It's questions, and we're going to get into
it is a question. Thanks, Jess. So, Jess, could you answer whether there's room or not for within this policy to add in at another later stage an environmental sustainability and carbon emissions reduction part to that procurement policy?
So I think the current policy signals a commitment to those organisations or suppliers who can indicate whether or not there'll be a positive environmental outcome. And I think that's detailed within the objectives of the procurement policy. I mean, it's our policy, so we can consider any changes at any time. I think Mark wants to make a comment. I'm not sure whether this has been considered around elaborating on that particular point already.
Just a quick point. If you look at items 12 and 13 in the paper, we have under practical considerations at the moment in the policy wider obligations of council to the community. And in item 13 in the report that I've written, certainly we should be, I think, strengthening the element of climate smart recovery. And we can pick that up as that develops. And that will support not only the local economy, future economic development, but also climate change mitigations.
Neil, you've got a question, have you?
Yes, I have, Mr. Chair.
You're on.
I just wanted to go to that criteria. I'm looking at the 5%, sort of moving that to 15. So that's essentially in selecting a supplier. Mark, I take it that's the criteria. I'm just wondering, just using the example of the purchase of native plants, which we have substantial amounts coming from out of town. Is there a notion of the percentage relating to the price of the product? And the other element to this is encouraging local suppliers to gear up to meet demand based on the knowledge that there may be some preferential treatment in the first instance to get us going. So have you got a comment on both of those issues, Mark, around
yes,
one, how you apply the weighting, and two, is there a sense of developing suppliers to provide?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Curtin. We went out to tender on the plant contract, and it was encouraging local suppliers to increase their capacity, and we were unable with the local suppliers to get the volumes that we needed for the programme. So we had to include two external to the region suppliers, both of whom are significant and supply transport agencies, so like Transmission Gully and other councils as well. One was Kari Park, which is Palmerston North based, and the other was another supplier in Palmerston North as well. But the majority of the suppliers are coming from our local suppliers, and we did have a weighting included. I can't remember the specific figures in it, but we did give preference to our local suppliers to support them rather than competing with the larger suppliers outside the region.
Michelle.
Could I, Mark, just noting like Cody Park and the other one, they're up in Auckland somewhere, and if you're looking at native plants, it's best to have eco-source. So if it should be from within our area. I think it goes about 50k out. So for example, like in Whitehall, we're subalpine, so there's only specific natives that pertain to this area. And another place we purchased, no, we didn't purchase it, the government purchased it for the planting projects I had here. They were from Minganui Nursery, so closer to our area. But again, Rick, this might be I bring it up I'm on the East Coast Māori Corrections Board with Peter Eden, and we just recently brought this up again. The prison nursery is another option, but just from my knowledge, it's better to eco-source within our area, not because I've heard some ugly stories about stuff coming from Cody Park. It's not from our area, and then therefore you get this distribution of native that's not, it's not a good thing to do. Okay, kia ora.
Go on, Michelle, you've been taking lessons from Rick, I see. Peter, can we keep it, because we can get a move in a second, and we can all if it's a question, Peter, Mike, sorry. I always get Mike and Peter mixed up.
Yes,
Mike,
yes.
is it a question?
It is, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jess. Just in regards to oversight, I note that within the report it talks about the procurement or procurements going in front of the Audit and Risk Committee. Is there the opportunity to have a internal independent operational audit prior to it going to the Audit and Risk Committee? That's a lot of stuff to put in front of the Audit and Risk Committee.
I think, Mark, you need to answer that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the reporting that goes to the Audit and Risk Committee is for contracts that are over $50,000 in value or perceived as being relatively high risk. So it's not every procurement we do. So, for example, there are a significant number of procurements that are done on purchase orders rather than contracts. So not everything is going to be coming in front of the Audit and Risk Committee, but from an independent audit perspective, we have in the past been using Crowe Horwath, who are now called Findex, and they do an external review to make sure that we are operationally conforming with what we have defined as best practice, both in the policy and the procurement manual. So they look for evidence that we're doing what we say we're going to do.
Yeah, I'd just add to that anything over, I think it's 400,000 goes to the tenders committee. So there is a additional layer of review at that point.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. Follow-up question. So when we look at fraud within organisations, a lot of it takes place within that procurement space. That's where a lot of fraud gets actually committed. Given the fact that we're looking to change the policy from a 5% to a 15% local content as being part of the overall makeup, there's the opportunity, if you like, to develop personal relationships with various suppliers locally. I'm concerned that there may become a perception, true or untrue, that there are, if you like, unscrupulous practices taking place during that procurement process. So that's why I'm kind of questioning, as in regards to operationals responsibility, to put a bit more care around the auditing within the operations, some independence. Keep everybody safe, keep the organisation safe, the I think procurement team safe from such accusations. Thank you.
Jess, I need you to comment on that. Do you think you've got all those structures right?
Yes, and I think we are intending to report back on the independent review of the procurement process that we had undertaken last year. And we have actioned the majority of the recommendations following that review, and we'll continue to do that. But the procurement policy is a live document, and we should continue to look at and review our processes. But I'm comfortable at the moment that we have enough process around our procurement.
Okay, do we have someone, we seem to agree with the amendments to support our local economy. Do we have someone to move those recommendations then? Essentially, it is to provide for those amendments.
Chair, I just had a different formulation of this. If you're willing to entertain some discussion before we go to decision, I'm happy to make a contribution.
Yes, well, okay. We'll make an exception.
Well, I really agree with the sentiment of this, and I'm sure everybody does, but I'm just struggling with it being so formulaic like 15%. The second, the 15, I just think in some of these cases, there needs to be a judgment. Now, for example, if we're going to pay significantly more for an item which is produced in Hawke's Bay than one which we could get that's produced in, say, Palmerston North, then we'd have to have good reason for it. And if the reason was really solid and sound, well, we might agree to a 20 or 30, 40% loading on that. But we need to do that in the light that if we're going to pay more for something, there's going to be a knock-on effect in the budget down the line. We don't have a money tree out the back in Dalton Street. We don't have unlimited access to cash, and we're always struggling to pay things. So I would feel more comfortable with a decision which said that we place a high preference on purchasing local to support the local economy, and that any decision which is made with that should be accompanied by a rationale and a logic which can then justify the decision and be aware of what the consequences of the decision would be. I'd be happy with that. And then we can all see the logic process and say we agree with that. But I wouldn't want it to be that we buy local regardless of all of those things, and therefore are paying an inflated price for something which might be of inferior quality simply because it's local. I don't agree with that.
No.
We are the guardians of our ratepayers' money. We have to ensure that they get best value and good quality.
James,
commentary, Rick.
Sorry.
Yeah, that is right. He is dead right, James. Have you got a thought on that? I mean, you're saying we amend the paper, Rick?
I say we amend the paper, just have a high preference be bought for local, and that any decision where local is preferred, it costs above other tenderers, that is done on the basis of an informed decision, and it's a logic which justifies, I don't know how you word that, but a logic tree, and it then is confirmed, so we can see it's open and transparent what we're doing, and we know the consequences of it.
So, Chair, look, I'm not entirely persuaded that having a more subjective policy that requires judgment will be more open and transparent. Look, we make our procurement decisions based on scoring criteria, which has a very specific methodology and involves multiple persons doing that, so there's moderation of that scoring. And the idea is so that you can have a very transparent and auditable process that staff can follow. And I understand that sometimes the methodology might be a little bit on the blunt side, but it is there to ensure that there is some consistency and rigor. So the idea of the 15% is to make a change to what is a scoring methodology that can be applied consistently in each and every circumstance. And look, in most cases, our procurement will involve similar services being offered at very similar prices, and it will often be a line call. And by having that scoring methodology, we do have a way of sorting that without too much subjective judgment being applied. But look, even the scoring involves some degree of judgment. So I'm not suggesting that it's a perfect solution, but it is providing more structure to the decision making, which is what we're trying to seek here. I don't know whether that addresses Councillor Barker's concerns, but I guess I would be concerned about our procurement staff being given a general direction without some degree of prescription, just so they're not in a situation where they're having to, I guess, make calls which might be questioned as to whether they're the right calls. So the more prescriptive it is, the safer it is in many respects for them.
Chairman, I withdraw my suggestion and I'll support the paper.
Thank you very much. Martin? You're on mute, mate.
And I take it we're on comments phase now.
No, not really. Rick did take some more liberties. So he has agreed to move the paper.
I have.
And if we have a seconder, we can go into comments. So Mark, would you second? So you have second. So Rick, do you want to comment further, or do you?
No, thank you.
Martin?
Well, thank you. Look, I totally understand where this paper's coming from, and philosophically, I share a strong degree of sympathy with the idea of supporting the region in any way we can, including through procurement decisions. What I'm just a little bit unclear about is, and that's where my question was directed to, is what the current setup is and how it works, because this isn't in the policy itself. It's in a delegations manual and the procurement manual that we haven't seen. I'm wondering if the council actually set the 5% as councillors, or was that set at staff level? Is this actually a decision for us at all? I guess is my comment. And I wouldn't mind understanding a little bit more what the implications would be for all of the issues raised by Mike and Rick in terms of how this would translate into specific decisions before making a governance level decision. I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I'm flying a little bit blind on it, where I can't see how that parameter operates in the context of a document in front of me.
Thank you, Martin. You might not want to complicate it, but you are, because you.
But I'm seconding the motion because it provide agreed amendments to support the region's economic recovery to staff for inclusion in the procurement policy. So that's the recommended amendment, is that we're actually providing some direction here, and philosophically I support where we can sensibly make consistent with financial prudence and without running into nepotism issues, supporting the region through our procurement decisions, because they are quite significant economically.
Can I make a suggestion which might clear up some of those questions or areas for clarification for Councillor Williams, in that we proceed with the paper today and perhaps provide an information paper at next month's council meeting, which provides a bit more information around the evaluation criteria and the procurement manual and how that relates to the policy. We're asking for your support to strengthen the procurement policy today, and then effectively staff implement that through the manual around how that's operationally actioned. So if we proceed with the paper today, and we'll follow up with an information paper at the next council, which provides a bit more detail around how this will be implemented.
Thank you, Jess, for that clarification. Well, we have a mover and a seconder, and Craig wishes to speak.
Just to note that there are avenues for anyone who has any concerns about any procurement issues or procedures. We have policies, independent policies in place for, be it councillors, members of the public or staff or representatives, to feed those concerns back up through the various systems, and this. So I just leave it there. But if there's any concerns whatsoever, touch base with the chair to learn what those processes are, because even we're always aware of such dangers. But if anyone has any inkling of any concern, please go via the CEO, and the right procedures would be followed.
Thank you, Craig. Any other speakers? Otherwise, we'll move the motion as it stands, and we've got that clarification. Michelle?
Just another comment on the plants again. So yes, I visited Minganui and Ngā which are high output native plant nurseries for New Zealand. And I understand the Ngā system. It's a digital process that looks at whether seeds are eco-sourced. However, when you compare what you can buy plants from these mass-produced native plant companies in comparison to a local nursery, they can't compete. Like, I think they could sell them a manuka for about 50-70 cents in comparison to local. And if you think that the money is coming from us, from the Hawke's Bay ratepayers, and we want to look after our local businesses, and that there's environmental money out there with the government, isn't there an opportunity that you can get some sort of funding to Hawke's Bay, Waimarama, Whakaki, look after our local economy, so it provides employment, and the turnover in nurseries. I did a 7-month research on it. Turnover in nurseries is very low. The profit margin isn't great. So you can't compete against big organisations that up in Auckland, and it's not fair. I think we need to be fair to our ratepayers and try and support local businesses. That's just my comment.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a good comment. Okay, I'm going to move it because we're already running behind time. Terrible. I'm having a dreadful day now. All those in favour? Aye. So it is moved, and Jess, you'll come back with some of those thoughts subsequent to it. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 10, the drought relief paper, which was a late agenda item, which was sent to your email addresses and is now on here, I see. Bronda, you did this paper, but I'm quite keen for Ian to, is he still here? He is. Ian, I'm quite keen for you to lead off on this, please.
Thanks, Chair.
Then Bronda, you can come in and support him.
Cool. Thanks, Chair. Look, just want to really briefly run you through some additional context. When I was writing the paper on Sunday afternoon, there was some context I probably missed. I'll share with you now. And look, I guess the key thing is that this is not an ordinary climatic situation that the region faces. So the table I've put up for you now shows you the monthly proportions of average for locations across the region for rainfall. So that's the proportion of the average for those sites by month. And you can see that there's not many figures in there that are made 100%. Most of them are very, very low and have been for some months. And then if we look at that and compare it to perhaps one of the more recent droughts that the region experienced, and we look at the average rainfall over the November to April period and compare that with the proportion that was experienced in that previous drought. You can see in the figures that are red that for many sites, those figures are lower than than that previous event. And I would say it's a reasonably good bet that this month, May, will be equally low. So I guess the key point is that, and that's probably also reflected in our soil moisture graphs, and these were updated as of yesterday, and the key thing to look at is the black line on the graphs, which are this year, and you can see that they basically flatlined just after Christmas and haven't recovered, and still haven't recovered. And even though we've had a little bit of rain recently, you don't have to dig far into the soil to get to very, very dry conditions. So this is an unusual situation. It's not normal. It's not something that's been experienced for many, many years, and is now being described as an inter-year drought. So the impact of this drought will flow through into production and the agricultural systems into next year and beyond, because people are having to manage their way through this by selling off stock, their capital stock that they would otherwise have kept on farm, and which otherwise would be the productive units going into spring and summer and then into the following year. And then perhaps the final bit of context is just to recall that agriculture is a pretty significant contributor to our regional GDP. It's third in the rankings for the March 2018 data, just under 10% of regional GDP from agriculture. So it's a pretty significant chunk of money that comes from this area. So that's some additional context. And look, just note that you will have heard from yesterday that Minister for Agriculture, Damien O'Connor, is in town. He was visiting the region yesterday and is talking to landowners today, and he's announced an initial Crown contribution to the Drought Relief Fund, which is gratefully received. And what we're asking for you today is to match the contribution of Hastings District Council. It's being signalled for their discussion tomorrow to get this fund started. So, Chair, I'll take the paper otherwise as read, and unless Bronda's got anything to add from a finance perspective, happy just to take questions and then get into the discussion.
Before we take questions, Bronda, do you wish to add to that?
So probably just from a financial point of view, just to make sure that we understand what the Regional Disaster Relief Reserve or Damage Reserve is for. If, as part of the paper, you'll consider that we've actually highlighted that it is for responding to a disaster event, which this has been signalled as being a notified event. The opportunity to use the disaster relief or the disaster damage reserve funds to pay for this is probably preferential at the moment, because these are reserves that have been specifically set aside for this process. The contingency fund at the moment is possibly going to need to be used to help fund any gap that we've got in our funding for the 19-20 year due to COVID, and this just alleviates that in that process. So that's all I'd like to say, unless anyone has got any questions.
Yeah, no, we'll be going to questions. Any questions, please, on the paper or to Ian on the drought or Bronda on the financials? Craig, you first, then Rick. Questions, Rick?
Thanks very much for the paper, and really good that you've described what the funds are going to be applied for and used and how, because the various bodies are already trusted by government to be used. Two questions actually, just on your Para 22, when you just talk about the Hawke's Bay Disaster Relief Trust, you just said there may be room for 2 more trustees, if I remember it rightly. I've just wondered what the thinking there is, as well as the representatives from the bodies that are giving funds. If you'd answer that one, please. And then secondly, when was the disaster relief fund last used, or a couple of examples where you last saw it applied? In anyone's money, you know, this is a big disaster, both environmentally and economically? And have we had any other examples where you've used proceeds from this fund to help bridge issues in and around some disasters, be they natural or man-made or influenced? And I may have more to say later on. Thanks.
So, Bronda's probably best placed. She's been closest to the trust establishment.
Do you wish to answer that?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the disaster reserve or the damage reserve funds, we've previously in the last 10 years drawn from that on 3 occasions. First one was for Macra Dam, which had approximately $750,000 taken from it to fix some stormwater. Plus, during the 16-17 year and the 17-18 year, there was approximately $1.1 million worth of funds withdrawn for the Kapuna Blackta or the Havelock North water issue. So those funds have been used previously in the past for this type of event.
Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Rick,
sorry. Chair, look, I'll just perhaps help Bronda out because she may not have the familiarity with the trustee issue on the Disaster Relief Trust. So that has only just been established, that trust. It hasn't previously been used. In fact, it was established just prior to the COVID-19 lockdown. The trust deed provides for 7 trustees, or up to 7 trustees, as I understand. The current trustees are the 4 mayors of the region and the chair of the regional council. It was established for the purposes of holding funds that might be pledged from the community or from other entities such as central government, local government, for disaster relief purposes. So it was really a mechanism to hold funds in recognition that in previous events, including the Havelock North water contamination event, there had been an interest in the community about providing donations to support relief efforts, but there was not a ready-made vehicle for receiving those. So it's been set up for precisely that purpose, and this is the first occasion in which it is being used.
Thank you, James. Rick, you had a question.
Question: how did we get from 100,000, which was our budget line, to 200,000? And what is the...
So, Chair, through you, that's the recommendation from staff. The $200,000 matches the contribution of Hastings District Council. So the paper lays out two funding options for the $200,000. There's $100,000 that's in a contingency that the chief executive can utilise, and it's proposed to use $100,000 from the disaster reserve fund. So it's an opportunity for us to match the contribution of our colleagues and our peers within the region, and of course, every dollar we put into this, we leverage more out of the Crown in their contributions.
Well, how can we leverage more out of the Crown when the Crown has already made its decision on this? So you're saying that there's more to come, and if so, with who from and how?
So the contribution announced by the Minister, as I understand it, was a reflection of the indications from councils going into this process. So he was aware that there was $500,000 was likely to arrive from the 3 councils, including Central Lines, and the $500,000 matches that. His $500,000 matches that.
So was the Minister told that we were going to put $200,000 in before we made a decision?
No.
No.
Next line of question. So if we put an extra $100,000 into this, which is over and above what we were budgeted for, what is going to be knocked out? Because we don't have unlimited cash. So what's the other money coming from? Follow-up question: if we spend all of this on this area, what capacity do we have within our system to help others outside this area who also might wind up in a very difficult position?
So look, Bronda can talk to the finances, but this is coming from a disaster reserve. It's not being taken from operational budgets. There will be no impact on our operational activities. Our work will not be affected by this.
Is that
free money then?
Well,
I
no,
was going to say a
Not
budget
free
work
money,
like
it
that,
has to
Ian.
be-
no. Well, it's money in reserve.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, Chair, so the paper does have several options, and the staff recommendation is that it is taken from the disaster reserve, which is held on the capital side of the council's balance sheet as reserves for these sorts of events. It is added to over time. There is, I think, Brondo, over 2 million.
2.35 million.
There's 2.35 million. So if 200,000 was drawn down, there'd be 2.15 million remaining for other needs in the community that might arise from a disaster event. It's not our recommendation that the $100,000 contingency in our operating budget be used for this purpose, and that still be held as a contingency, potentially against, and particularly against, a likely drop in revenue in the council's operating P&L at year end.
My last question, Chair. Given that the council was considering making a $100,000 contribution in a general way to those agencies and things that helped, and this seems to be switched entirely to be focused on the farmers' drought in southern Hawke's Bay. What are we doing to help the other parts of our community across from the top, from Mahi all the way down, who have struggled through this? I don't see us doing that at the moment.
Chair, look, I'd note that we've put significant council resources into supporting the regional welfare response to date, and that has been of benefit to all of our vulnerable communities from the top to the bottom of the region. The 100,000 contingency was previously discussed as being made available to a community fund in relation to COVID. That option still remains available to council if that's the desire of council to use those funds for that purpose.
I think that answers Rick's questions, perhaps not to his delight and satisfaction, but we have to move on. We get your point, Rick. Now, there's Api was lined up, Jareth, then you, Hemingway. So I'm going back to you, Api. You had your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question was around in reference to page 6. Is it? No, sorry, further back in the report, page 3. There is mention around the movement of stock feed interregionally. So I didn't pick up anything in the report around applications to our biosecurity team. I did see earlier in the activity from HBRC that our biodiversity team and pest control team have picked up some of their activities in other areas. And I'm looking from Rhonda, I assume when she says that any unexpected costs are going to come out of contingency, if that's an incorrect assumption, could she provide some clarity in that space? And how are our biosecurity team equipped at the moment or prepared to be able to handle that significant potential increase in biomatter coming into our region?
The Chair, perhaps I can respond to that.
Ian needs to answer that part of the question, Api. Ian?
So Chair, look, the movement of feed throughout New Zealand is a long-standing practice that's happened ever since farming has occurred. So there's no significant biosecurity risks associated with this, and all of the usual biosecurity practices and procedures will apply to this exercise, and it will be managed carefully. So we're not anticipating any additional work for our biosecurity team as a result of this.
You okay with that, Api, that answer?
Fantastic, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Jareth.
Just a question in relation to a comment that Rick made. This is not about Central Hawke's Bay. This is about all Hawke's Bay drought, farmers' drought relief, correct?
Correct, Councillor. So the only part of the region that's really been spared this has been Wairoa. It's been fortunate. Basically south of Cricklewood Road, right through into almost Parongaho, just around Parongaho is affected by this. And we have to bear in mind that when one part of the region is feeling drought, all parts will. There are flow-on effects of grazing not being available, stock not being available to put onto grazing. So areas like Wairoa that are traditionally finishing parts of the region and rely on stock production from the more productive flat areas will be affected because they won't have the finishing stock to put on farm in coming years. So everybody feels this. The whole region feels this in one way or another.
Okay, thank you for that answer, because I didn't want to get into an arm wrestle with Councillor Foley as to who gets the feed.
Thank you, Jeff. And before I go to Henny, it's clear you've been taking lessons from Rick and Neil on the art of turning a statement into a question.
Or it could be a clarification.
Henny, the floor is yours.
So this is either for you, Rex, or James. Could you please clarify what you mean by matching? Because if we look at what other councils are providing, we have Hastings indicating 200, we have Central Hawke's Bay 100, Napier City 0. So when you say matching funds with other councils, can you please clarify how that agreement comes about?
I'll talk to that anyway. There's no agreement. I guess every council's going back to their councillors at the moment saying, how can they help here? Hastings, of course, is the largest council outside us. I think they're even a lot bigger than us in our region, and they're very conscious that they are a trading town and that farmers are a huge part of them. I mean, the fact they have the stockyards is in the middle of their town. They're very conscious that farming has, over the last 100 years, had a huge impact on the growth of their town. So they are recommending that they do contribute $200,000, and I'm pretty sure the mayor is quite confident that will happen. So when we talk about matching, it is just what each council has the capacity to do, and I think Ian's point is that we probably have the capacity at least to do the same as Hastings. In regard Napier, there's a lot of pressure on Napier to contribute as well. My own personal point of that is they are also a city that relies on farming, but they are a city that is at the real sharp end of this problem in terms of, this is more to Rick's point, I guess, because tourism has such a big impact, and it's predicted by all the consultants and all the economists that Napier will suffer hugely and more than the rest of us here because of such reliance on tourism. So although they have a large balance sheet, as was mentioned in the paper this morning, they also have large infrastructure problems they have to deal with. So probably right now don't have the capacity to match Hastings or even ourselves. But they've been asked if they could do what they can, really. Does that answer it, James? Are there any other questions, Neil?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I really appreciate in the paper, Ian, the dashboard, which details those farms that are in trouble. My question really is, we started this discussion talking about $100,000, and it's now migrated to 200. What part of the rationale in the 100 discussion was that the volume or the funds going to welfare through to COVID issues through central government substantially dealt with issues in the urban setting, and yet now we've got 500,000 coming from central government. So I'm really challenged to be stepping up the amount of funds given, if you like, the equity issues that arise, and I think Rick has sort of alluded to that as well. So my question, Ian, is the $2 million, if it's targeted specifically at the most at risk or distressed farms, what is that per farm, and what sort of outcomes are we expecting for them?
Yeah, so Councillor, perhaps the useful bit of context was in paras 25 to 29, where I took some figures from beef and lamb, working with a local beef and lamb person, just to try and give a bit of a sense of the scale and the magnitude of this situation, and you can see that it's quite daunting and quite large. The numbers are pretty significant. And the dashboard reflects our view, and that's out of date already because it's continually being updated with calls to land owners that happen every day. The dashboard indicates a situation we feel that is poised for further calamity. So particularly the farms that are in the coping or managing space, the 101 in this particular figure. It won't take much and won't take long for those farms to go from managing to not coping and needing direct and immediate intervention and assistance. And recognise that this is not a comprehensive view of all farms throughout the affected area. This is a snapshot of ones that have been contacted to give us a sense of the scale in the challenge. So we're aiming for $2 million. We're only actually out of all of this, if we're fortunate to get the contributions, going to end up with $1 million to contribute towards transport costs. The transport costs are going to be directed and focused on things like removing the cost of getting donated feed into the region. So those who wish to donate feed, and there was a fantastic effort from Wairarapa farmers recently, the Rapa Run, that brought 6 units of baleage and hay into the region, all donated. So we're looking at how we can cover the costs of transport. The drivers of the trucks gave up their time, but they're looking for fuel and road user charges costs to be met. And then in the big picture, for us to be able to manage our way through this with a reasonably secure and reliable feed supply, given the scale of the feed balance needed ahead of us, we're talking large volumes in bulk, probably a lot of grain out of the South Island transported by ships to get here and get processed and packaged and distributed across farm from here. We're looking to meet the cost of the shipping to get it out of the South Island into the North Island, to cut off those costs, because typically in a dry spell that this region might experience, farmers could pick up the phone and they get feed from the Waikato or Northland or the Manawatu. But all of those regions are severely short. In fact, talking to the Rural Advisory Group members last night, the Manawatu is shifting back into a severe feed shortage situation itself. So we don't have the traditional mechanisms in places to go. So we're having to go to further flung places that carry significant costs to get them here. The intent of the fund is to reduce that cost to as many farmers as we can.
Will, have you got a question, Will, or a comment?
Would I be allowed to provide some further clarification to that dashboard?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, so the dashboard was largely undertaken during the lockdown, so it was all phone work. And so talking to the Rural Support Trust guys that did all that work, they're now obviously been able to get out and about a bit more, and they're commenting that it's different talking to a farmer on a phone. As you can imagine, he's probably pretty proud, doesn't like to admit things are perhaps not going so well. And so when they're getting to the out on farm and seeing these guys eye to eye, seeing the condition of their farms and the stock, it's probably not looking as well as it explains on that dashboard. So that's what they've found, post lockdown, and been able to get out and about.
Thank you, Will. Well, it's obviously different. Is it, you got questions or comments? Because I want to make it. I want to move the motion and just see where it goes.
I'd like to move it.
So no, I wish to move it. I want to move the motion and with point number 3, which agrees that we lift it to 200,000. So you will second that motion.
Yeah.
And I wish to speak to it. I get the point that there are a lot of people suffering, and this is the point that's been laboured. We're not able to help everyone, but the government has stepped up, and Neil did allude to that, considerably with the wage scheme and all sorts of other little things they've done. A lot of these farmers are solo operators, so they haven't been able to get the wage subsidy. They're really out there on their own on this one. I also get the point that that has been made that it's a drop in the bucket, probably. I mean, we're not even sure if we can get all the feed out there, and if this drought continues, and even if we get rain now, the grass isn't going to grow. So it's a small amount from us, and it comes out of our disaster fund. None of this comes off our P&L. None of it. It comes 100,000 of the disaster fund, and the other 100,000 comes from a fund which James controls. So, we can't say this is an additional hit to the ratepayer. We still have substantial amounts in our disaster fund in case we had a disaster. And that's like a big flood or hits our stock banks or something like that. And we do have a disaster. And these guys have been hit not only with COVID, so the isolation of COVID, some of them have got TB and as well as a very, very serious drought. And I think that we should be doing the small amount, because it is relatively small in terms of our balance sheet, to give them a hand, because there's some real relevance here. And it was raised yesterday with the Minister. This is a matter of getting as many of these farmers through as we can get through. And it's that their contribution was to our GDP is vital, as was raised by Ian. So if we can get just one extra farmer through so that he can then get back into his farming practices, get back into contributing to our GDP, then this investment is going to be well worthwhile. Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I thought I'd said enough in support of this proposal in principle at the last meeting in minor items. Not that it really is such, and I accept that, but I'd give this 2 votes if I could, one for each $100,000. We're dealing with what I understand to be as much as $8 million just transportation costs, let alone the cost of the feed itself. I recall reading that in the last 2 or 3 days. I was delighted to see Rex's idea of a Merrill disaster relief fund get such a positive response from central government, leveraging off the support that local government had signalled. Now, I don't think it works the other way, that we can now say that given the central government stepping in, we don't need to act. It's actually worked in reverse. Our signalled support, and that's all it has been to this point, for this council at least, has leveraged a very significant central government response, which is meaning we're getting critical mass. So I guess the other 2 things I wanted to say is that, we need our farming communities on board with us if we're going to achieve our environmental and our economic objectives as a region. And this is a real practical way we can show support to their cause in turn at a time of acute need. And to the point about, well, what about everyone else? This is a notified, as Rhonda shared with us, a notified qualifying disaster. That's point 1. And we have an allocated reserve for this purpose. And that's why I support the modest amount that we're intending to apply at $200,000 for that purpose. We're looking at a $1 million contingency for economic recovery as an option for our annual plan. And I'll be making sure as a Napier constituent representative that Napier gets its turn as well. Don't worry about that. But I think this is where the immediate issue is of absolute immediate concern. We support the tourism industry very significantly financially, still do, have done for a long time. And if I was going to be honest about that, I would continue that. I've always been in favour of that support. So I totally commend options 3 and 4 in the paper. I think Rex's idea of a Merrill Relief Fund or a Regional Leaders Relief Fund is an excellent proposal, and commend it accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other speakers? Will?
Yeah, could I just support both of what you just said there? The farming community will very much appreciate the support, as they have all the support that's poured in the last week. You would have seen the Rapa feed run last weekend, and just that support brought tears to many eyes because of the outpour and reach the support to the farmers that are under a lot of pressure and stress. So look, I think thank you for those comments and support. I'd just like to say that I'll abstain from the voting, just to I guess not avoid any perceived conflict here.
Thank you, Will. I'm not sure that, will you be a recipient of the fund?
Nah, so at this stage I don't.
Abstain then?
No, look, I've got no plan to draw on any support. I have a plan for the winter with the current stock I've got on and the feed that I've budgeted. So I have no need, haven't called up for any support yet and don't plan to.
Then you need to vote. Sheriff. Sheriff?
I agree with Rex. And what the two speakers before that have said. I don't think it's going to stop here. We're not quite sure, and I don't think we can get our head around how tough this is going to be for our community in the hill country. And I hope, I surely hope, and I support this motion, and I surely hope that this is not the end from our council, that we're going to continue to do what we can with all the policies that we've got in place, the staff that we have got, especially when staff are becoming available again from the COVID-19 response, that they're able to actually assist. And really, I would like to see that we can see some rapid movement in consent processes as well to assist these farms getting out of this really difficult situation. So I support it, and I won't take too much of your time.
Did you have Neil?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. My support for this resolution is very much based on the actual need, and it's undoubted that it's there. The matters that I'm concerned about with the paper really go to what a greater extent of contribution and engagement over a longer term. I too don't believe this is the end of it. I think we needed to have had at least a 6 and 12 month approach to this, so that we were clear, that this investment up front it had a future. I am conscious, though, Mr. Chair, I'm very relieved that money does in fact grow on a tree in Dalton Street. By all accounts, it's just we go out there and take the money off and away we go. The reality is that disaster fund is contributed by the ratepayer over time, and I think we need to be cognizant of that. The other element that I think we ought to have put into the paper was we are dealing when in fact there's a parallel disaster going at the same time. And I'd like to have seen a bit of an equity discussion taking place as a part of this, so that we did recognise the need to dip into the disaster fund, and I'd be interested to see what words are written around access criteria to it at a future date. And I've foreshadowed already in the minor items the need to bring back some dialogue around our other disasters occurring at the same time right in front of our eyes. I'm pleased to see in the paper identification and targeting of the funds to in the dashboard we've got, and I'm pleased we've got that. What I'm concerned about, though, is the apparent inability of Tourism Hawke's Bay and Business Hawke's Bay to bring back a similar dashboard, so that we're clear on where the bodies lie in terms of our support across the board. So we're dealing with a multifaceted situation, and I think we ought to have had a bit more, if you like, rigour going into the way we're approaching this, and I look forward to the next iteration of it. And the other final point, Mr. Chair, and it goes back to a very, very good question raised about biosecurity, bringing in feed from out of town. And you'll be aware of a very significant disease, pea weevil, in the Wairarapa. Also, myrtle rust is another plant disease that we could do without in our region. So that question needs to be asked again around what biosecurity efforts we're putting into this. So we're not bringing in something that we really don't want. But Mr. Chair, finally, fully support the measure. It's only a small amount in relative terms, but we need to think strategically across the board as to what our support looks like when we've got substantial parts of the community in distress.
Thank you, Neil. Speakers, Craig.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to other speakers. Look, I'm very supportive of it. My only caveat is this jump we had from 100K discussion last week to 200 now. I fully understand how and why. It's even a different fund, which seems much more appropriate now, and in context of how that fund's been used in the past. That's fine, but I also acknowledge those that have been putting this together have been boots on the ground with many of the those that are suffering through the drought or trying to help others through. So they've had a lot of balls in the air, and maybe there'll be a lot of learnings or something from this, but I guess I should acknowledge and thank them for what they're doing. And I'm more than comfortable for us to contribute 200,000 item 3 and 4. The bottom line is we need other discussions about tourism and other things as well. That's perfectly right. But let's not taint what we're trying to do here with our other political leadership organisations across Hawke's Bay and from central government doing the right thing, helping our farming community, our farming families, at the very least, giving them confidence to keep backing through, and there's someone standing beside them as we go through this. And we will be suffering this throughout Hawke's Bay, at least for the next year, probably more like 2 years at the end of the day. It's the least we can do, and I'm very supportive of where we've landed on these recommendations.
Okay, if there's any other speakers, otherwise I'll move it and see how we go. It's been moved and seconded, 3 and 4. So just to be clear, it's $200,000 from 2 different funds. All those in favour?
Mr. Chair, can I just ask that question around where it's coming from? I understood it's coming from the Disaster Relief Fund.
No, 100,000 is coming from a fund that James controls.
Chair, just to be clear, the staff recommendation is for the full 200,000 to come from the Disaster Relief Fund.
That's right.
And you reserve your 100,000.
Correct. That is our staff recommendation.
Okay. Well, sorry, I read that wrong. You're correct, Neil, to pull me up on that. Thank you very much. That all comes from the disaster, which is much more appropriate. So, all those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Right, we'll go to information items. So we're running behind time, I'm afraid. Summary report on the Clifton, our coastal hazards. Who's giving that?
Well, with the absence of Chris, I can. There's not really much to update. We've had our meeting on the 1st of May, which was a bit challenging on Zoom, to be honest, but we got there. And we're struggling with the concept of funding, as we all knew we would be struggling with, but especially with now COVID-19 and the responses from the TLAs and from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. We really have taken a bit of a pause on that discussion until we actually can get together with the TLAs. However, we are really keen to continue with the work that we're doing, and Jose is doing an excellent job in doing some modelling. We're looking at what that may look like, what different options may look like, just to see if there was actually any benefits in changing what originally was planned. So the work continues, and Chris and Simon are doing an excellent job. Mainly for information, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for stepping in. I've got some questions. Got Rick with his finger up, but I just want to ask one myself. Can you clarify how we're struggling with the other partners in this?
The struggle mainly has been to actually get in front of them and get them together to actually discuss because the big conundrum is who rates for this, and we have target rates, and definitely we have a difference of view between Hastings District Council, Napier, and HBRC as to what they may look like, and we haven't landed on one place, and we really need to get there. And even if we can't agree, we need to find a solution, because this work needs to continue, needs to happen. It's a fantastic strategy. It's really well developed. We've got a good project manager in Simon, and we would like to continue with this. And all the councils who are part of the joint committee do agree, but we have this disagreement as to where we sit. And this is for well before my time. We actually haven't had these discussions yet. I've had the discussion with the deputy chairs from Napier and from Hastings, and we have got a common agreement, but we still need to take their councils on board as well. So the next thing that we need to do, and James possibly will have a view on this, the next thing we need to do is actually getting in front of the councils and possibly get the councils together and actually come to a landing place. And once we've got a landing place, we then can move on with the work, which is actually very important, because some of this work actually is also in regards to recovery is actually very important work as well. And James may have some points to raise.
I think you raised it sufficiently, Sheriff. You're having difficulty getting agreement on how you're going to fund this, which is quite typical of our region. Rick, a question from you.
Well, I was going to, because I attended the committee, I was going to offer some commentary if that would be acceptable to you.
Okay. It is.
Oh, good. This is going to be, I think, a really challenging issue. The meeting was difficult because we're all on Zoom, we didn't know each other and so on. But I had a sense of alarm ring in the back of my head when there was a discussion about some protection workers needed to be put up in Napier. And the issue of funding came along, and the people who were directly affected, i.e. what I would loosely describe as having a private benefit in this scheme, pointed to the fact that over the water was the Port of Napier. And the problems with the erosion and so on were attributed to the port. That being the case, they couldn't therefore define who the group was. The rate then was made a general rate. So, end of story. Then we were told by the people of Napier they went through a robust process as required by the Local Government Act. Well, I have, like some of you on this meeting here, have worked in the Local Government Act in this area, and I can tell you that it ain't a science. It's quite a lot of other things, and it became really clear to me that we have got an emerging problem. The issue is fundamentally this, that the more people you have in the room to be able to point the finger at who paid the bill, the less likely you are to get people to agree on who's going to pay it. It's that inverse square law at operation. And I think the Local Government Act is deficient here. So I have in mind to work with Sheriff and said to Sheriff, what we'll do to work out this is that I'd like to have a conversation, the Minister and Sheriff and I, to say, well, we've got an issue here about how we define the allocation, because we can't find this allocation, an allocation mechanism that works fairly. We're going to be in a worse position than we were over the funding of civil defence, where the region in the end had to take it. The second thing is, I think we need to look for MFE, and we have to find a structure where we've got a series of lines that work out how these things are balanced and weighed, so there's less ability to dodge. And I'd like to use this as a practical example to demonstrate where the current legislation and the current framework is weak. In fact, is a hindrance to us. If we can't solve this, we're not going to make progress forward here or in other places. And when I look at what's happening in other parts of New Zealand, it strikes me with alarm. So this is a problem, and I just thought the example we have with two councils and a regional council in the same area can't agree on how to fund it. If we can't fix this, we're in a very, very sticky, boggy situation going nowhere forward. So that was my intention, to work with Sheriff to try and get some intellectual effort put on this. I see that James has got a furrow in his forehead and his finger up, and I'd like to hear what James has to say.
Yeah, I would too, because Rick, you're dead right on that. This has to be resolved. James, how are we going to resolve it?
Well, look, not so much a furrow, but the council's deputy chairman's brain is something of a carbon copy of the wider public sector machinery on many occasions, and it's very much the case here. Look, the issues that we've been traversing here are being actively explored by central government as a case study of the legislative and funding challenges of climate change adaptation for New Zealand. And we had a detailed piece of work undertaken by the Ministry for the Environment late last year of this piece of work, drawing all of those conclusions about the reforms, public policy reforms required to deal with this issue more permanently and more universally. That work was presented to resilience ministers. There is a group of ministers of the Crown who are responsible for the climate change resilience issues, and so they have been briefed on these. And arising from that, we sought a meeting just prior to the COVID lockdown with the Climate Change Minister, James Shaw. He agreed to the meeting and was enthused about having it, but because of COVID, it has been postponed. We will be finding a date, and it would be helpful to have councillors join a discussion with the minister to talk about the challenges we face and what assistance government might provide. So Councillor Barker is absolutely on the money in terms of what needs to occur. Otherwise, we're going to try and blaze a trail here as a region, which we've been doing to date. But it does get increasingly difficult with the current absences in the policy framework, particularly in terms of Crown funding, given that in many of these instances there are Crown assets that are also at risk, for which we don't collect rating revenue at present, and they make no contribution to the solution. So look, I think now is the time, particularly leading up to our long-term plan, to have a surge of work around this, so that when you are making decisions for the upcoming LTP, as well as HDC and NCC, you've got the best possible guidance as to how to take this matter forward, and we don't continue through another LTP cycle to be spinning our wheels on this.
Well, thank you, Joe. Jeff, I'll come back to you. Martin just wants to answer. And if we can be brief, guys, because we are really cutting into our time now.
Well, just thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to offer some support if anyone is getting together to look at local government act mechanisms for this huge funding headache that I've seen coming for a while, I'd be very happy to participate, whatever skills or expertise I've got to contribute to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jareth. And I'll ask you to move this paper too, Jareth, after you've had your chat.
Yeah. So I think what Rick is proposing, I really support that. And where we were at, well, we were at a first mover disadvantage. We are so well prepared as a region, but hopefully through all of this, we actually will turn that around and become it and change it to a first mover advantage. That we are the ones that actually will lead this, and therefore will get the support from central government in this as well, with the able help of Rick. To no further ado, I would like to move the motion that we accept the report that's in front of us.
And Rick will second it. You don't need to speak further. Rick, would you like to speak?
I'd second it. Just say to follow up with James. James, could I have a look at that paper, please? I'd be very interested in it. And my interest in this is a public policy matter too, because I have had the experience where thinking in Wellington doesn't always match the reality on the ground. And so what I thought was a fantastic opportunity here is for the reality on the ground to be driven up and reflected into central government policy, and to have this sort of virtuous circle. We could be, if you like, the test bed for how this thing will work, because the current framework simply does not. And there is enthusiasm for this work. We need it to be able to go forward, but we need a framework, and we can't just continually have every party pointing to the other and saying, well, it's your responsibility, or we don't want to do it, you'll have to do it. Because, of course, they're all, if I'm being perfectly cynical about this, looking to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council's balance sheet to say, well, you've got the money, we have got as much, so they'll be wanting us to pay, and if we don't do something here, we will be in a very unenviable position.
Thank you, Rick. And we will wind up, but I actually do want to comment and support Rick there. They're not so much looking to our balance sheet, they're looking for our ability to rate across the whole region. So this is an absolute classic case where Hawke's Bay is so often the first mover. We're the first mover on another very potent issue that we're looking very smart in Wellington at the moment. But actually behind the facade of our first mover initiatives is the chaos of a region that is divided by so many minor councils. That is what happens. So we might be the first mover, Gerard, but I don't have the same confidence unless we accept the responsibility, which I can see Neil frowning now, then it won't happen because they'll all go into their little corner like they always do. That's what happens when you have 5 councils ruling a very minor province. Anyway, anyone else got any comments of frustration? Craig.
I'd object. It's a very mighty province, Mr. Chair.
Mighty, but 160,000 of us, mate. It's a suburb of Sydney.
That's right.
Well, okay. Yeah, you need to say something here.
Craig is his name.
No.
Neil's the word you're looking for.
Neil, I'm looking for your name. I'm having an Alzheimer moment, Neil.
Yes, I know how that feels, Chair. Just a very minor comment because it's probably a little more than just the rating issue across the region. There's a real dichotomy of the actions that should take place. We've got Hastings Council and councillors rampant on the idea of hard engineering solutions for the Hamawana part of the coast, and our council, I would suggest, would be totally opposed to trying to stop the sea doing what the sea does in that zone. So, those same Hastings councillors want us to pay for that hard engineering. So, in addition to the funding issue, there is a philosophical issue around what is to take place.
Okay, thank you. Look, we're not going to continue this discussion because it's clearly bounding out of bounds at the moment. So, all those in favour, all those in favour of receiving the summary document, moved by Rick, second, Craig. Thank you very much. All those in favour, aye. Right. So we have 4 items. Minor items, and can we keep them minor, please, so we can get into our workshop? Neil, welfare around COVID.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. It's more by way of request, which obviously the minor items have taken many twists and turns. They are something one minute, something different the next. So, but this is a request to bring back for staff to bring back a paper. Looking at options for us to provide welfare support to the most distressed of our community, to link it to our rate remissions and the payment of rates. Those sorts of issues I think we need to get on the table now to make a decision about what I think is looming very quickly, expenditures on welfare issues. And finally, Mr. Chair, in so doing, can we please call it the Leaders Welfare Fund when we've only got 2 mayors supporting it, and the other one calling it a Merrill Fund is simply one bite too much to swallow.
Thank you.
Just can I just make a couple of quick comments? One being that the fund is called the Regional Drought Relief Fund. It's not Merrill Fund, so that's the actual working title on it.
It's not, James, because it's in the paper, you see, and if it's in the paper, that's it.
Hey guys, settle down, James. You shouldn't have come in there. I'm going to get into trouble later because you came in there.
You are going to be in trouble. This is a failure of your leadership. You let
absolutely
the sheep around the paddock are running all down the street.
You're having a shocker, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Uppy, the moment is yours.
Can I please just make a process comment? We've just had a request for a report, and previously there was discussion about using minor items for request for reports. There are very clear protocols around requesting for reports in standing orders, and I've just had a look online, and of course standing orders have still not been lodged into Stella in the resources section for councillors because we're still awaiting the finalisation of standing orders, I believe.
So all bets are off.
But I would be very happy if council's happy to upload the previous standing orders, and we work off those standing orders as indeed we should be, I think, until such time as they are revised, and that will explain to everybody the process around calling for reports.
Okay, thank you, James.
Hallelujah.
We did clarify that at the beginning of the meeting. You mustn't be getting your smoko delivered to you at the time, and we said on this one occasion we would allow those two. So, but we'll go back to standing orders. You know how much I love standing orders. Uppy.
Thank you. And I have received the same advice from a number of staff around sourcing reports. So I really appreciate that clarity. Having the standing orders in play would also provide that clarity. Thanks to the staff for actually already addressing. I'm quite happy to remove my minor item. It was about a report request. While we've been going through the agenda items, that process has been outlined to me, and so I'm aware that there is already a request in play, so there's no need for me to bring a minor item forward at this stage.
Thank you, Uppy. Michelle? Erosion.
It's same with me, Rex. We're gonna sort through that offline with Ian and co. I think I've rubbed off on you, James. You were talking a bit too much, and
okay, thank you, Michelle.
So last week, I'm kapai. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. I just have one. I just want to report on the meeting with the minister yesterday. A raft of issues were discussed, of course, around the drought. But the one significant issue that came to mind at the meeting was his focus on water storage. Definitely was the top of his mind, that water storage, not only throughout our region, but throughout the entire New Zealand, with the changing environment and the changing climate, was very high on his agenda. So I think that's something that we need to take up with him. We thanked him for the 30 million contribution, of course, but he and his colleagues seem to be ready to really address this issue going forward. So we'll, after the election, we need to really focus on that, and it looks like they will more than survive. Okay, that is the end of our meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. And did you open the meeting up? Did Paddy open the meeting up? Therefore, he will close it?
No, we had proper Karakia.
Who did the Karakia? I wasn't here, remember.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Who did?
Mike.
Then you'll close us, Mike. Thank you very much.
Happy to do so, Mr. Chairman. Ka tai mai te wātu te whakakapi a tātou hui I tēnei ata. He me ki a koutou, mō koutou kōrero, whakaro, I tēnei ata. So just thank you to everybody for their input to today. More importantly, given the conversation around drought, I'd like to thank our Heavenly Father for the rain we've had over the last week. Although it's certainly not enough to break the drought, hopefully it's a start of things to come. With that, I'll bring us to a close with our karakia kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tātou ariki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me ngā pipi nātaitanga ka wairua tapu o ake, āmene, mauri ora. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day and your workshop. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you very much.
Now we're back at when do you want the other